Imagine a frozen morning on the Great Plains in the winter of 1890. The prairie lies buried under a thick blanket of snow, the sky heavy with gray clouds, and the only sound is the howl of a relentless wind slicing through makeshift tents. Inside a ragged canvas shelter, a Lakota family huddles around a dying fire. Their rations are nearly gone. One child coughs through the night, another sleeps restlessly, bones pressing against skin, hunger eating into their dreams. The buffalo, once the lifeblood of these people, are all but extinct. So how do you dance when the world around you has stopped breathing? The traditional ways of life had unraveled, land seized, treaties broken, ceremonies outlawed, identity itself under siege, children taken to boarding schools where their hair was cut, their languages forbidden, their songs turned to silence. Across the plains, the rhythm of ancestral memory was being erased, beat by beat. But even in that void, in that breathless silence, something stirred. In 1889, across the dry valleys of Nevada, a Paiute man named Wovoka lay feverish during a harsh winter storm. Rain beat the earth outside his shelter. He trembled under the weight of something larger than illness. And then, as he later told it, the world split open. A bright light, a presence, a journey into the spirit realm where he saw the ancestors dancing. The earth whole again. The buffalo returned, peace reigning. He returned with a vision and a message. Wovoka preached not of vengeance, but renewal. He told native people across many tribes, if you dance, the ghost dance, in the right way, with the right heart, the world will be restored. The colonizers would vanish, the dead would rise, and harmony would return. It was a promise as wild and vast as the land itself, and one too powerful to ignore. The message traveled faster than cavalry could ride, carried by songs, smoke, and word of mouth. Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho. Across the plains, word spread like wildfire. Tribes that had never shared ritual began gathering in circles, drums pounding, feet moving in unison to rhythms older than memory. And this wasn't just about faith, it was about survival, a new form of resistance. Quiet, sacred, defiant. To dance was to remember. To remember was to resist. But the power of faith can look dangerous to those who rule through fear. The US government, however, didn't see it that way. To officials and generals, the dance looked like a spark waiting to become a wildfire. They labeled it dangerous. Newspapers screamed of Indian uprising. And while native families prayed for renewal, Washington prepared for war. Pain in this era wasn't only physical, it was the kind of grief that comes from watching your world dissolve. The ghost dance became more than ritual. It was a heartbeat, a signal, a vow. And that's where our story truly begins. Not in Washington, not in textbooks, but in the rhythm of drums, in the swirl of dust beneath dancing feet, in the fierce refusal to disappear. Because when the world forgets you, the only way to survive is to make the earth remember you. To the untrained eye, the ghost dance might have seemed like just another ritual, repetitive steps, arms raised, heads tilted toward the sky. But beneath the surface, it was something far more intricate. More than dance, it was technology, a system of memory encoded in motion, rhythm, and breath, a spiritual algorithm running on human bodies as its processors. Ghost dance wasn't simply worship, it was survival by resonance. In each step, each chant, native communities were syncing their minds and bodies to a collective frequency, a shared belief that they were not broken, not erased. When hundreds circled in the dust, eyes closed, voices layered like wind through tall grass, they weren't performing for outsiders. They were tuning their souls to an ancestral signal, trying to reboot a world out of balance. Here's the weird part. Modern science is only now catching up to what these communities intuited generations ago. Anthropologists have studied how collective rituals produce a neurochemical state called communitas, a heightened sense of unity, of emotional synchrony. Neurobiologists talk about limbic resonance, where emotional energy spreads through groups like electricity. The ghost dance wasn't metaphorical. It was quite literally a form of cultural self-repair. The movements were simple: shuffle steps, hands raised, eyes often closed. But that simplicity was the point. By repeating the same gestures in circles day after day, dancers created a loop, not unlike the groove in a vinyl record, where memory, belief, and identity could play without distortion. And in the center of that loop was not despair, but vision. Wovoka's prophecy didn't promise revenge or even justice. It offered something far more radical: restoration through peace. He said the earth would be renewed, not by war, but by spiritual alignment. That the dead would return, not as specters of grief, but as guides to the living. That the buffalo would roam again because balance would be restored. Think about that. In a time when every weapon, every treaty, every court ruling was used to dismantle native life, this man stood up and said, "Dance, not fight, not beg, just dance, and the world will hear you." This wasn't naivety, it was resistance at the level of vibration. In Wovoka's vision, the future wasn't built by weapons, but by frequencies, rhythms, rituals that connected sky to soil, the living to the lost. And those who danced felt it. Many reported visions while dancing, seeing ancestors, hearing ancient languages, even witnessing the future. These were not hallucinations, but awakenings. Dancers fasted, prepared spiritually, cleansed themselves with sage and cedar before stepping into the circle. This was not random motion. It was a carefully calibrated technology of remembrance. The circle itself mattered. No corners, no hierarchy. In a world being carved up by lines, borders, plots, reservations, the ghost dance offered geometry of unity. One continuous loop mirroring the sun, the moon, the heartbeat. And what about the music? Drums struck at steady intervals, low, deep, echoing. Songs passed orally with melodies that changed slightly from tribe to tribe, yet always anchored in a common pulse. This was information transmission through resonance. Oral data coded in chants, traveling farther and faster than written text ever could. Some dancers wore special shirts, ghost shirts, said to be bulletproof by spiritual power. To many, these garments were more than protection. They were declarations of belief, woven armor of hope. Here's the catch. To outsiders, especially settlers and soldiers, this all looked like madness. They couldn't hear the frequency. They saw spinning bodies and painted shirts and mistook prayer for rebellion. Fear has a way of turning the unfamiliar into a threat. But inside the circle, something else was happening, something bigger. The ghost dance was sinking bodies across the plains to a single pulse. It was a cultural defibrillator, a chant against erasure, a reactivation of memory not held in books, but in muscle, rhythm, dust, and breath. And the more they danced, the more powerful that signal became. It wasn't just a spiritual exercise, it was living infrastructure. A memory network powered by community, carried by dust storms, passed on through generation and gesture, carried across time and touch. A way to keep being when everything else was being taken. The ghost dance wasn't just a ritual, it was a system, and like any sophisticated system, it relied on tools. Some were physical, others metaphysical, but each one served a purpose: to hold memory, to generate power, to transform pain into presence. Start with the most iconic, the circle. In the ghost dance, the circle wasn't decorative, it was fundamental. A living geometry of balance, no beginning, no end, no hierarchy. Unlike Western formations that place authority at the center or the front, the ghost dance circle flattened power. Everyone moved together. Every dancer supported and sustained the others. The circle allowed energy to build, not linearly, but in spirals. This was how stories moved. This was how memory was carried, not forward, but around. But a circle alone isn't enough. Every system needs a stabilizing force, and that's where the drum came in. The ghost dance drum wasn't about spectacle, it was about coherence. A low, steady beat, like a heart inside the earth. It wasn't meant to inspire aggression, it was meant to induce trance, a shared heartbeat that kept hundreds, sometimes thousands, moving in rhythm for hours. The drum didn't just unify, it healed. Some said that when the drum beat fell into your bones, you could feel the ancestors drumming from the other side. Then came the songs. Repetitive, circular, passed by breath, not by books. Each chant was a carrier of code, historical fragments, spiritual instructions, geographic memories. These weren't just songs, they were sonic maps. Different tribes adapted the lyrics. Some sang in Lakota, others in Paiute or Shoshone. But the structure remained. Looping phrases, rising intonations, melodies designed to blur the line between now and then. Though the ghost dance began with the Paiute, it quickly spread across tribal lines, from Lakota to Arapaho to Kiowa. Each tribe adapted the form, adding unique rhythms, garments, and meanings. This wasn't cultural diffusion, it was cultural fusion, a continent-wide response to displacement, bound by rhythm and faith. But perhaps the most visible tool, and the most misunderstood, was the ghost shirt. Made of cotton or buckskin, these garments were painted with moons, stars, animal totems, and sacred symbols. Some bore handprints, symbolizing spiritual protection. Others were marked with red circles over the heart, signaling strength, love, or readiness for sacrifice. Some were plain, others elaborate, with feathers, beads, and quill work, but all were charged with belief. Many ghost dancers wore these shirts convinced they would protect them from bullets. Outsiders mocked this faith. But today, psychologists understand the ghost shirt as a belief amplifier. Like a uniform or a religious robe, it reinforced identity from the outside in. To wear it wasn't delusion, it was declaration. That your body was sacred, that your soul was shielded. Putting on the ghost shirt was like stepping into a different identity. You weren't just dancing as yourself, you were dancing as your ancestors, your future children, your people. Let's talk about preparation, the tools before the tools. Fasting was common, not just to purify but to empty the body of distraction, to listen better, to feel deeper. Some fasted for days, others slept alone in sweat lodges or sat in silence under the stars. Before entering the circle, they burned sage, sweetgrass, or cedar, herbs chosen not for fragrance but for function. Smudging cleansed more than the skin. It cleansed doubt. It aligned intention. Science now tells us that burning sage releases compounds with antimicrobial properties. But for the dancers, that smoke was something else, a signal, a boundary between the world of noise and the space of spirit. Another tool, dreams. Wovoka's original vision came through a dream. A high fever, a storm, a glimpse of the ancestors. And after him, dancers kept dreaming. They dreamed of songs, of steps, of places together. These dreams weren't private hallucinations, they were public blueprints, interpreted communally. The line between vision and instruction was thin. Dreams became schedules. They told people when to move, where to go, what to wear. Even location was a tool. The circle wasn't drawn just anywhere. Many were made in open plains, where wind could carry the chant. Some were formed near sacred hills, water sources, or old buffalo trails. The earth wasn't just background, it was participant. The direction dancers faced mattered. The position of the sun, the weight of the soil. Wind direction was watched closely. Some believed that north winds carried voices from the ancestors. Others timed the dance with moon phases, believing that energy aligned best during certain lunar cycles. Even footwear, often soft-soled moccasins, had purpose. They grounded the dancer, allowed skin to meet soil. Connection wasn't metaphorical, it was tactile. And when all these elements came together, drum, circle, chant, shirt, dream, earth, something shifted. Clothing, breath, fire, rhythm, all became interfaces between faith and function. Together, these tools didn't just support belief. They engineered it, they encoded it, they passed it on. So when you looked at a ghost dance, you weren't seeing chaos. You were witnessing a layered design, where each motion, item, and intention held purpose. Nothing was accidental. This wasn't chaos, it was choreography. This wasn't magic, it was architecture. Each object in the ghost dance had dual meaning, symbolic and functional. A feather wasn't just decorative, it was aerodynamic, spiritual, and cultural. A shirt wasn't just fabric, it was ideology stitched into skin. And the more these tools were used, the stronger the system became. Every drum carved, every chant memorized, every shirt painted. It wasn't performance, it was preservation. Here's the real insight. The ghost dance was never improvised. It was meticulously built, maintained by memory, protected by practice. The ghost dance wasn't just ritual, it was a toolkit for remembering, for resisting, for rebuilding. But a system only lives when it's practiced, when tools turn into habits. The ghost dance wasn't just a ceremony to be watched, it was something to be done. With your feet, your breath, your memory, it lived in the body. Setting up a ghost dance gathering took planning, trust, and coordination. It began with the arrival, sometimes after days of travel, through blizzards or dust storms. Families packed tents, tools, food, and clothing. Some came on horseback. Others walked. When they gathered, they didn't build churches or temples. They cleared a wide space for the circle. That open ring in the grass became the sacred axis, the spinning heart of the whole event. Dancers prepared mentally and spiritually. Fasting, smudging, and prayer were common in the hours before. Some painted their faces with red ochre or white lines. Others wore their ghost shirts carefully folded until the right moment, shirts only to be worn within the ring. Then, slowly, the dancers began to move. It started with a single beat, one drum, low, steady. Then came the second, and a third. Soon the ground itself seemed to pulse with rhythm. Participants stepped into the circle, usually clockwise. No sharp turns, no gestures of power, just the soft shuffle of feet, arms raised slightly, palms open to the sky. Some danced with eyes closed, others looked upward, singing or whispering prayers. There were no spectators. Everyone was either in the dance or serving it. And the dance could last hours, sometimes the entire day, sometimes two. People joined in shifts. Some danced until collapse. Others stepped in quietly while others left to rest. Children joined, elders too. The circle had no exclusions. It absorbed everyone equally. And in this spiral of motion, something began to happen. Here's the catch. It wasn't just movement. It was transformation. Many dancers entered a trance state. They saw visions of ancestors, of future lands, of buffalo herds returning across the plains. Some fell to the ground and convulsed. Others wept openly. A few spoke in tongues or sang songs unknown to them before the dance. These weren't dramatic performances. They were breakthroughs, emotional releases, spiritual messages, or perhaps memories from beyond. One elder from the Lakota recalled, "When I danced, I became my grandfather." His voice came through mine. His hands moved where mine did. I knew the steps before I was taught. This wasn't metaphor. It was experience, embodied, unexplainable, but utterly real to those inside the circle. But how was the ghost dance sustained logistically? Communal labor. While some danced, others cooked. Food was shared freely: stews, dried meat, berries, bannock. Women often prepared herbs and teas to help soothe exhaustion or treat the sick. Medicine men and women tended to those who fell during trance. Children were kept close, either joining in or watching silently, absorbing the rhythm through their skin. Packing, moving, and resetting the camp was done with practiced efficiency. The community would relocate to other regions for new dances, responding to dreams, prophecies, or calls from allied tribes. Some families followed a seasonal ghost dance circuit, like pilgrims of rhythm and hope, and the land mattered. Each dance site was chosen with care: flat ground for safety, proximity to water, wind flow, sometimes even alignment with stars. Some elders believed that certain places remembered the dance, and that returning to them renewed the power of the land itself. Within the dance, roles emerged organically. Some held the rhythm, some led chants. Some dreamers interpreted visions mid-dance, whispering meanings to others or singing out names of ancestors who appeared. There was no central authority, no single prophet leading every circle. The system was decentralized, yet synchronized by faith. When night fell, the circle didn't stop. Fires were lit. Songs changed in tone, deeper, slower, more mournful, or more ecstatic, depending on the visions received. And under the stars, the dance took on a different layer. Faces lit by flame, shadows merging with moonlight. The ghost dance became a ceremony of memory and mourning, but also of prophecy, because it wasn't just about the past, it was always reaching forward. Children were taught the steps not by instruction, but by imitation. They learned when to raise their arms, how to breathe through fatigue, how to enter a trance without fear. Stories were told between dances, about Wovoka, about the great buffalo, about the time before fences. These weren't bedtime tales, they were continuity rituals, cultural scripts handed down not on paper but on foot. One Lakota grandmother once said, "We don't tell children what the ghost dance is. We show them, and when they ask, we say, 'Listen to the drum.' That's your answer." This method of embodied learning ensured that the ghost dance didn't fossilize into history. It stayed alive, in muscle memory, in song, in soil, but over time, outside pressure mounted. US officials began to ban the dance. Indian agents threatened arrest. Soldiers raided camps and broke drums. Some tribes were forced to conduct the dance in secret, in caves, at night, in silence. But even when stripped of song and shirt, the dancers kept moving. Even in prison, some drew the circle in dirt with their fingers and imagined their feet completing the steps. The ghost dance survived because it wasn't just a ritual, it was a habit of resistance, a behavior rooted in being, a way of life that said, "We remember and we move forward together." The practice wasn't always visible, but it never vanished. Today, descendants of those dancers still gather, sometimes for history, sometimes for healing, always for remembering. Because a circle, once started, never really ends. What did the ghost dance actually do? To some, especially those outside the culture, it might have seemed like wishful thinking, spinning in circles, chanting to a vanishing past. But for those who danced, the benefits were real, tangible, and deeply embodied. Start with the most obvious: emotional survival. In an era defined by cultural destruction, forced relocation, and existential despair, the ghost dance gave people something nothing else could: hope with movement. It was a grief ritual and a resilience practice rolled into one. For many, just entering the circle meant choosing life over despair. Instead of freezing under trauma, they moved, they breathed together, they remembered together. And through that shared motion, they reclaimed agency, even if only for a few hours. Some described it as a reset. Others said it gave them strength they didn't know they had. The act of dancing, especially in freezing cold, on an empty stomach, wearing the shirt of your beliefs, transformed the body from a site of suffering into a vessel of resistance. But the effects weren't only personal, they were communal. The ghost dance created networks, alliances between tribes that had rarely, if ever, stood together. The Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Kiowa, Shoshone, Paiute, each brought their own songs, their own interpretations, their own tools. But in the circle, those differences dissolved. The dance was a common language, a shared pulse, a rotating, gathering point that re-knit fragmented communities across stolen territories. Anthropologists now refer to this as cultural cohesion under duress, when a dispersed people find new strength not by returning to one center but by building many. The ghost dance wasn't centralized religion, it was decentralized spirituality. It spread horizontally, not vertically. Power wasn't held, it was shared. That, in itself, was revolutionary. Then there's the physical aspect. Modern science shows that rhythmic group movement, especially synchronized walking, chanting, or dancing, reduces cortisol, increases oxytocin, and strengthens the immune system. Many ghost dancers reported fewer illnesses during dance seasons, not because of superstition, but because collective motion literally made them stronger. They built physical endurance, emotional regulation, and group trust. This wasn't just ceremony, it was medicine. And let's not forget ecological awareness. Embedded in the ghost dance was a deep, functional memory of land. Dancers aligned with the stars. They followed buffalo trails. They watched the winds. Through the practice, people maintained seasonal foraging habits, collecting wild plums, chokecherries, service berries, and sharing pemmican, dried roots, and tea blends across communities. In this way, the ghost dance quietly sustained ecological literacy. Every chant held more than prayer. It carried the names of plants, animals, watersheds, migration routes. This wasn't nostalgia, it was education, and that's what made it dangerous to colonizers. The US government feared the ghost dance not because it was violent, but because it was effective. It preserved memory, it spread, it united. It told native people, you are not alone, you are not finished, and you are not erased. The ghost dance used no weapons, yet it triggered full military responses. That tells you something. It wasn't just a belief, it was a mechanism for survival. And yes, in some tragic cases, belief led to miscalculations. Some thought the ghost shirts would stop bullets. They didn't. The massacre at Wounded Knee was a devastating blow, not just of lives, but of momentum. The government called it the end of the ghost dance. But the truth is more complicated. Because while the Federal Army may have crushed a camp, they couldn't crush a circle. While they burned shirts, they couldn't burn rhythm. The people kept dancing, sometimes in secret, sometimes in silence, sometimes just in memory. The ghost dance became encoded not just in movement, but in worldview. Even today, its echoes remain, in powwows, in drum circles, in intertribal alliances, in the way memory is carried through breath, not books, in every act of resistance that favors healing over harm, culture over conquest. The ghost dance didn't stop time, but it bought time. It gave people something to hold on to and something to pass on. What remains when the drums fall silent? When the dancers leave and the wind smooths over the footprints in the grass? What endures? The ghost dance was never meant to be an artifact. It wasn't designed for display. It was a living, breathing expression of knowledge, scientific, emotional, ecological, and spiritual, wrapped in rhythm. And even though its practice was violently suppressed, its message never stopped moving. At its core, the ghost dance is a declaration. You may take the land, you may silence the drums, but you will never erase the rhythm inside us. It wasn't a fantasy of going back. It was a blueprint for going forward, one that recognized that healing doesn't come from dominance, but from reconnection. The ghost dance invited people back into sync, with land, with time, with ancestry, and with each other. And its message still pulses today, not only in tribal lands, but in a world desperate for rhythm, memory, and meaning. In an age of global climate collapse, social fragmentation, and digital fatigue, we need more than innovation. We need indigenous intelligence, not just facts, but wisdom, not just technology, but ceremony. And ceremony, the ghost dance reminds us, is a form of resilience. It teaches that sustainability isn't just about efficiency, it's about relationship, to place, to history, to each other. That real strength isn't control, it's coherence. In universities, scholars are now revisiting indigenous science not as folklore, but as systems engineering. In mental health, group rhythm and communal ceremony are being rediscovered as valid, powerful healing tools. And in sustainable architecture, designers look again at circular housing, breathable structures that respond to wind, water, and heat. All of this echoes what the ghost dancers knew. Survival isn't straight, it's cyclical. Even its structure, a circle, speaks volumes. A line divides, a circle connects, a line ends, a circle returns. And in that geometry lies an ethic of equality, of shared space, of continuity, where every forward step includes a glance back. For Native peoples, the ghost dance lives on, in powwows, in language revitalization, in intertribal ceremonies where the drum is more than instrument, its compass, calendar, and heartbeat, in every child who learns to sing the old songs, in every elder who speaks a name the government tried to erase. And for the rest of us, the ghost dance offers no quick fix, but it does offer an invitation. For those outside the circle, the call is not to imitate, but to witness, to honor, to listen deeply. Not all traditions are ours to hold, but every wisdom is ours to respect. The ghost dance asks us, what if memory was movement? What if healing required rhythm? What if survival isn't about standing tall, but dancing together? In times of grief, it teaches, don't freeze, move. In times of chaos, don't isolate, circle. In times of silence, remember, even a whisper repeated with rhythm becomes a song. So what now? Now, we remember that culture is a verb, not a noun. Now, we see that wisdom isn't only stored in books, but in bodies, in ceremonies, in soil. The ghost dance wasn't only about the past, it was, and still is, a future practice, a choreography of connection, a quiet revolution that whispered, we are still here, and we still remember. Because perhaps the most powerful thing about a circle is that it can begin again, anywhere. So the real question is, will we keep dancing, or will we forget? The answer, like the drumbeat, is up to us. Preserve native knowledge. Live sustainably with the land.